That's really nice. I could listen to that some more. That's Soul Farm singing Yehi Shalom from their album Unwind. How's everybody doing? Let's light up the darkness with a new wisdom candle, which I didn't melt. So why don't I do that in case, God forbid, it should fall. All right. And let's light up the darkness. Okay. Who is with us as we gather to do yet another spectacular page from track date Megillah? Stephen in Dover, New Hampshire, Pauline in Arkansas, Paula in Chicago, Bill in Missouri, Renee in Indiana, James in Indianapolis, Bella in Florida, Patrice in Utah, Nancy in North Carolina, Roger in Key Largo, John in Sedona, Ingun, Shalom from Norway. Welcome, Ingun. That's a new name, and I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing it wrong. Great to have you with us, all the way from Norway. Excuse me. David in Florida, Paula in the cold Northwest, Lucy in Minnesota, Sharon in New Jersey. Loves this song, Yehi Shalom, by Neshama Karlbach. She's great. John in Maine, Janet in Olympia, Washington, Sarah in LA. Chaim has Charlotte in the house. Paul in Minneapolis, Hannah in New York, Kimberly in Alabama, Miriam in Colorado, and over on the YouTube side, Aoife in Ocala, and Neil in Virginia. Welcome, everybody. Today's episode of AT Daily is sponsored by Anonymous for the healing of our dear friend Alan. May Alan have a complete recovery, a complete and speedy recovery, and we say amen. And Anonymous, you know who you are. May you and all your loved ones be showered in blessings, and we say amen. And thank you for enabling us to share more Torah with more people around the world. Have I mentioned that it's our annual campaign? 3 days left. This is the time to hop on the wagon, enable us to build the AT app next year. Donate.accidentaltalmudist.org. Nina will put that link in the comments. All right. Yesterday we had no class. Nina and I were at a shloshim, so that's at the end of 30 days. You know, it's often a tradition to do a memorial service for the dearly departed, our good friend Moti. The app is actually going to be named the Accidental Talmudist app in memory of Moti Kest Zivrono Livracha. May his memory always be for a blessing. It was such a moving event. As I mentioned, I learned with him, I davened with him, and we both served together on Magenam. And Moti also served the community in a really big way by being a member of Hatzola, which is an EMS service, an emergency medical services organization here in the Jewish community. And last night, they retired his number. I guess this is a tradition when police officers and firefighters fall in the line of duty. And so they put out, like he had a number in the EMS service, and they put out over the radio in front of this ceremony, they called out his number, and of course he didn't answer. That's the idea of it. And they did that twice, and then they retired his number. So his call number will be retired forever from Los Angeles, Hatzola. Moti, we miss you. May your neshama have a great, great aliyah. So I mentioned that also because now we are a page behind, and usually when we're a page behind, I want to do a double daf right away when we do the next show. But I don't want to do a double daf today because this page is so rich, right? All these pages here in Megillah, in this part of Tractate Megillah, when we're interpreting the Megillah, the book of Esther, going verse by verse and doing beautiful digressions. There's just no point in rushing through this. And maybe not tomorrow either. So, very soon we'll catch up. We'll do a double daf. Maybe it'll be tomorrow. Maybe it'll be the next day. But it's definitely not going to be today. So for a little while, we might be a page behind. No big deal. Lots of Daf Yomi classes fall way more than one day behind, and then eventually they make it up. Okay, so no worries there. Where are we actually holding? This is page 15 here in Tractate Megillah. We're still in chapter 1, still doing a lengthy exposition of Mishnah number 13. Okay, so we're going to pick it up near the bottom of 14b. So yesterday or Sunday, we were talking about the 7 prophetesses of Israel. So finishing up that discussion, Rav Nachman said haughtiness is not befitting a woman. It's not befitting a man either. But here it's just some examples about women. And a proof to this is that there were 2 haughty women whose names were identical to the names of loathsome creatures. One, Devorah, right? So Devorah, we don't normally think of Devorah as being related to some kind of loathsome creature. It's a beautiful name. But in Hebrew, it's also the name of a hornet, right? So it's not really loathsome, but it's not like we want hornets near us, right? So one, Devorah, was called a hornet, as her Hebrew name, Devorah, means hornet. And the other, Huldah, was called a marten. So that's sort of like a ferret, and we've talked about martens before. There are a lot of halachas that are based on the idea that a marten could sneak into your house and take a crumb of food and run away before you catch him. So it's that same animal. The Huldah is the name of the marten. And as her name is the Hebrew term for that creature. Now, from where is it known that these women were haughty? With regard to Devorah, the hornet, it is written, and she sent and called Barak. That's Judges 4:6. But she herself did not go to him. And with regard to Huldah, the marten, it is written, say to the man that sent you to me, second book of Kings 22:15, but she did not say to the king, right? So a messenger came to her from the king, and she said, well, say to the man that sent you. She didn't refer to him as the king, and that's deemed haughty on her part. Furthermore, Rav Nachman said Huldah was a descendant of Joshua, now that we're talking about her. And an allusion to this, Joshua, who led the children of Israel into the promised land, an allusion to this is written here in second book of Kings 22:14. Huldah, the prophetess, the wife of Shallum, the son of Tikva, the son of Charchas. And it says elsewhere with regard to Joshua, and they buried him in the border of his inheritance in Timnas Heres. Judges 2:9. And therefore intimating that there's a certain connection between them. And Rav Eina the elder raised an objection from a baraisa to Rav Nachman's teaching about this connection between Huldah and Joshua. What is the objection? So I'm sorry. So this is a baraisa. 8 prophets who were also priests, right? So there were 8 prophets who were also priests, descended from Rahav, the prostitute. Who are they? Neriah, his son Baruch, Sariah, Maaseiah, Jeremiah, his father Hilkiah, Jeremiah's cousin Hanamel, and Hanamel's father Shallum. And Rabbi Yehuda said, so too, Huldah the prophetess was a descendant of Rahav the prostitute. As it is written here with regard to Huldah, the son of Tikva. And it is written elsewhere in reference to Rahav's escape from the destruction of Jericho, the cord of Tikvat, scarlet thread. So recall that Rahav sort of hid those 2 spies that Joshua sent into Jericho prior to the battle of Jericho. And she realized that, God was with these people, the children of Israel, who were about to enter the promised land. God was not with the people committing child sacrifice and other abominations in the land. And so, even though most people didn't give her a lot of respect since she was a prostitute, but she also happened to have an apartment in the wall of Jericho. And so that was, a very convenient place for the spies to get some information. And because she helped them and hid them and enabled them to get away when the soldiers were looking for them, they said to her, when we invade, put this red thread outside your window, and you and whoever's in your dwelling with you, we will spare. Everyone else is going to get killed. And that's what happened. Now, what's amazing is she, became very spiritual after that, had a real teshuvah in life, no longer worked as a prostitute, and ended up marrying Joshua, the great Joshua, who led the Jewish people, the successor to Moses. So Rav Nachman responded to Anna the elder. Okay, so we just read that there's this, that there were 8 prophets who were also priests, and they were all descended from Rachav, the prostitute. So Rav Nachman responded to Anna the elder and said to him, Anna the elder, and some say that Rav Nachman said to Anna the elder, blackened pot. Right? So you might think if somebody calls you a blackened pot, like a burnt pot, that's, not so much of a compliment. But it's totally a compliment. It's meant as a compliment, i.e., my colleague in Torah, who has toiled so much that he blackened his face in Torah study. Why would Torah study blacken your face? Because Torah is like an ever-burning fire, right? So like you're so involved in the fire of Torah that it blackens your face. What a compliment. So he says to him, my elder, who I respect so much, I just want to say to you, from me and from you, the matter may be concluded. In other words, the explanation to this seeming contradiction lies in a combination of our two statements. Was Huldah a descendant of Joshua? Was Huldah a descendant of Rachav? Well, Rachav converted and she married Joshua. This is the source for that. And therefore, Huldah descended from both Joshua and Rachav. And the Gemara raises a difficulty, but did Joshua have any descendants? But isn't it written in the genealogical list of the tribe of Ephraim, Nun, his son, Joshua, his son, and the listing does not continue any further, implying that Joshua had no sons. And the Gemara answers, indeed, he did not have sons, but he did have daughters. Now we're on 15a at the top. And the Gemara asks in reference to the 8 prophets descended from Rachav. Granted, with regard to them, it is explicit, i.e., the 4 sons recorded in the list were certainly prophets, as the Bible states this explicitly. Jeremiah was a prophet. His student Baruch was one of the sons of the prophets. His son Hanamel came to him at the word of God. See Jeremiah chapter 32. And Sariah was his student. So they're explicitly listed as prophets in the Bible. But as for the fathers of these men, Hilkiah, Neriah, Shallum, and Maaseiah, from where do we derive that they also were prophets? And the Gemara answers, as taught by Ulla. As Ulla said, the sage Ulla, wherever one's name and his father's name are mentioned with regard to prophecy, it is known that he was a prophet, the son of a prophet. And therefore, his father's name is also mentioned. And wherever his name is mentioned, but not his father's name, in the case of prophets, it is known that he was a prophet, but he was not the son of a prophet. And similarly, wherever his name and the name of his city are specified, it is known that he was from that particular city. And wherever his name is mentioned, but the name of his city is not mentioned, it is known that that prophet was from Jerusalem. It was taught in a baraisa with regard to anyone whose actions and the actions of his ancestors are obscured and not explained, and the verse mentioned one of them favorably. For example, the way in which Zephaniah the prophet is introduced, Zephaniah 1:1, the word of the Lord which came to Zephaniah, the son of Cushi, the son of Gedaliah. It is known that not only was he a righteous man, he was also the son of a righteous man. And conversely, whenever the verse mentioned one of them unfavorably, for example, in the verse that introduces Ishmael as the one who killed Gedaliah, which states, and it came to pass in the 7th month that Ishmael, the son of Netaniah, the son of Elishama, that's Jeremiah 41:1, it is known that not only was this Ishmael a wicked man, but he was also the son of a wicked man. Rav Nachman said Malachi, the prophet, is in fact Mordecai from the book of Esther, from the Purim story. And why was he called Malachi or Malachi? To indicate that he was second to the king, Melech, as Mordecai was appointed such. Mordecai became in the Persian Empire like Joseph had been in Egypt, right? He was the grand vizier, second only to the king. Where am I? He became second only to the king, as Mordecai was appointed as such and is recorded in the Megillah. And the Gemara raises an objection from the following Baraisa. Baruch, the son of Neriah, Sariah, the son of Maaseiah, Daniel, Mordecai, Bilshan, Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi all prophesied in the 2nd year of the reign of Darius. These were all contemporaneous prophets. And the fact that the Baraisa mentions Mordecai and Malachi separately indicates that they were two different people. You can't say it was the same person. And the Gemara concludes this is indeed a conclusive refutation. Give me 1 second. I'm just going to get myself a glass of water. I have a little water dispenser here. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shakol hibidvar. Okay. It is taught in a Baraisa, Rabbi Yehoshua ben Korcha said, Malachi is in fact Ezra, right? So both of them have books named after them in the Bible. Malachi, very short book in the prophets, and Ezra, right? The leader of the Jewish people went back into the Holy Land and reestablished the Second Temple. So now Rabbi Yehoshua ben Korchi is saying Malachi and Ezra are the same person. And the rabbis say otherwise. Malachi was his real name. English Malachi, Hebrew Malachi. So let's just go with Malachi in English. Malachi was his real name, and it was not merely another name for Ezra or another prophet. And Rav Nachman said it stands to reason that indeed they are one and the same person, like the opinion of the one who said that Malachi is Ezra, since there is a similarity between them. As it is stated in Malachi's prophecy, Malachi 2:11, Judah has dealt treacherously, and a disgusting thing has been done in Israel and in Jerusalem. For Judah has profaned the sanctity of the Lord, which he loved, and has married the daughter of a strange god. Married idolaters. And who was the one that removed the foreign women who were married to the Jews? It was Ezra, as is written in Ezra 10:2. And Shechaniah, the son of Jehiel, one of the sons of Elam, answered and said unto Ezra, we have broken faith with our God and have married foreign women of the peoples of the land. Therefore, I guess that was part of the teshuvah, because then they divorced those wives and took Jewish wives and reestablished the kingdom. And it therefore appears that Malachi was one of Ezra's names, as the Bible describes them both as confronting the intermarriage problem with idolaters. The intermarriage epidemic is how Rav Steinsaltz puts it here. To complete the discussion about the prophetesses, right now that we're finishing that discussion of the 7 prophetesses of Israel, the Gemara cites a Baraisa in which the sages taught there were 4 women of extraordinary beauty in the world. Sarah, Abraham's wife, Abigail, King David's wife, Rahav, Joshua's wife, and Esther from the book of Esther. And according to the one who said that Esther was greenish in color, meaning that she lacked natural beauty. She was pale and was not particularly striking, but that a cord of divine grace was strung around her. So therefore, remove Esther from this list and insert Vashti, the queen that was the previous wife of King Ahasuerus, and that Esther replaces. For she was indeed beautiful, and she was, as we learned, the daughter of King Belshazzar. And the sages taught in a Baraisa, Rahav aroused impure thoughts merely by her name. The mere mention of her name would inspire lust for her. Yael by her voice, Abigail by remembering her, Michal, the daughter of King Shaul, by her appearance. And similarly, Rabbi Yitzhak said, anyone who says Rahav, Rahav, immediately experiences a seminal emission due to the arousal of desire caused by Rahav's great beauty. Rav Nachman said to him, I say Rahav, Rahav, and it does not affect me at all. And Rabbi Yitzhak said to Rav Nachman, when I said this, I was specifically referring to one who knows her personally, right? One who knew Rahav personally and saw her beauty. Only for one who has met Rahav in person is the mere mention of her name capable of arousing lust. New subject. The Gemara returns to the explanation of the verses of the book of Esther. We're working our way through interpreting select verses from the book of Esther. Now we're up to Esther 4:1. When Mordecai perceived all that was done, Mordecai rent his clothes, right? When he perceived that Haman had issued this decree in the king's name that all of the Jews of the empire, meaning of the world, would be murdered on the same day, on the same date, right? Which is going to be that day in the Hebrew month of Adar that ends up becoming Purim. But when he first heard about this death sentence, he ripped his clothes, right? In the same way that when someone dies, we rip our clothing. That's a Jewish custom. And he put on sackcloth with ashes, and he went out into the midst of the city, and he cried with a loud and bitter cry. Esther 4:1. And the Gemara asks, what did Mordecai say when he cried out? And Rav said, he said that Haman has risen above Ahasuerus, for he saw that Haman had become even stronger than Ahasuerus himself, right? He had influenced the king to do what he wanted, so in a sense, he had more power than the king. And that he now controlled all affairs of the empire. And Shmuel said, the upper king has prevailed over the lower king. Now, this is one of those sort of like difficult to understand euphemisms that the sages will sometimes use. What we've discussed a bunch of times, when the sages refer to the enemies of the Jews, they're talking about when we, the Jews, act in ways that are contrary to our best interest. Here, when he's saying that the upper king has prevailed over the lower king, well, the upper king is God, and the upper king always prevails over all lower kings. It's obvious. But when he says here in this context, the upper king prevailed over the lower king, what he's actually saying is that the lower king, temporarily, for a moment, seems to be prevailing over the upper king. It's a euphemism for that, meaning God loves the Jews, but this lower king, whether it's Ahasuerus or now Haman, who seems to be even more powerful than Ahasuerus, has decreed that all the Jews in the world are going to be annihilated. So it would seem like he has more power than God at this moment. Obviously, that's not going to remain that way, but that's the way that it seemed for a moment. The next verse to be interpreted is Esther 4:4. Then the queen was exceedingly distressed. And what is the meaning of the word being used here for exceedingly distressed? Vatis chalchal. Vatis chalchal. And Rav said this means that she began to menstruate out of fear as the cavities, chalalim, of her body opened. And Rabbi Yirmiyah said her bowels were loosened, also understanding the verse as referring to her bodily cavities. This is very human. We had a lot of training in our security class that in a hyper-adrenalized situation, when you're in fear for your life, it's actually quite normal that a person's bowels release. And it's just part of battle, and soldiers experience that all the time, and people should not be embarrassed if that happens to them. It's natural. And the verse states, Now Esther 4:5. Then Esther called for Hasach, and he was the guy in charge of the women's house where Esther was living. Esther called for she was already married to the king. So Esther called for Hasach, one of the king's chamberlains, whom he had appointed to attend upon her. And Rav said, Hasach is in fact the prophet Daniel. And why was he called Hasach? Because he was cut down, Hatach, from his greatness during Achashverosh's reign, as he was demoted from his high position. Previously, he had served as a senior minister to the king, and now he had become Esther's steward, the queen's steward. And Shmuel expounded the name Hasach as derived from Hatach. It has the opposite sense. As he said, Daniel was called Hasach because all the affairs of the kingdom were decided, nechtachin, by his word. He always maintained his influence and authority. The verse continues to relate that Esther sent Hasach to Mordecai after hearing about the decree to know what this, zeh, like the Hebrew word for this, to know what this was and why this was, right? To know what this was, to ask him what's going on, this and this. What is the this and this? Why are you bewailing like this? And Rabbi Yitzhak said that Esther sent a message to Mordecai saying, well, perhaps the Jews have transgressed the 5 books of the Torah, as it is written with regard to the 2 tablets on this zeh, on this side, and on the other side, zeh and zeh, side were they written. In other words, when she said the words zeh, repeated in her question to what's going on with to Mordecai, suggests the same as this and this about the 2 tablets of the 10 Commandments, and perhaps the reason that, there's this evil decree against all the Jews that they're going to die is because they've all violated the 10 Commandments. She's asking, according to this interpretation. And the verse states, and they told Esther's words to Mordecai at Esther 4:12. But he, Hasach, the messenger that she sent, did not go to tell him directly. And the Gemara explains, from here we see that one does not bring back a sad report. If one has nothing positive to say, it is best for him to remain silent. There is some, incontrovertible, indisputable wisdom. If you have nothing positive to say nothing. And this explains why Hasach himself did not report the information to Mordecai, and Esther's words had to be delivered by other messengers. I mean, if you have to deliver a message, okay. But if there's any other way to convey bad news, don't be the bearer of bad tidings. Esther sent a message to Mordecai. Go gather together all the Jews who are present in Shushan, the capital, and fast for me. That's why to this day, right, we have Tainus Esther, the fast of Esther. So it's this fast that we commemorate. So go gather together all the Jews who are present in Shushan and fast for me, and neither eat nor drink for 3 days, night and day. So that, we think that Yom Kippur is difficult. They had a 3-day fast, night and day. I also and my maidens will fast likewise, and so will I go to the king, not according to the custom, right? So when we read the book of Esther, it says that, no one can just ask for the king's attention. Like if you show up in the king's chamber asking for his attention, he can grant you the request, or you can be executed for your effrontery. So that was the big risk that she was taking. But Rabbi Abba interprets that verse not according to the custom in a different way. Rabbi Abba said, it will not be according to my usual custom, meaning Esther's usual custom. For every day until now, when I submitted myself to Achashverosh as a wife, as his queen, for sex, in other words, it was under compulsion. But now I will be submitting myself to him of my own free will. And then Esther further said, and if I perish, I perish. So we always read that when we read the Megillah as, okay, she's going to ask to speak to him, and if he has her executed for that, then if she dies, she dies. She's taking that risk. But this deeper meaning, what she meant was, just as I was lost to my father's house, ever since I was brought here, so too shall I be lost to you, to Mordecai. For after voluntarily having relations with Ahasuerus, I shall be forever forbidden to you. In other words, and this is so interesting, and this is where we get this understanding, right? It's always a little bit ambiguous. What is Esther's relationship to Mordecai? And when we teach the Megillah to our kids, we usually say he's her uncle, he's her guardian. No. According to this understanding of Rabbi Abba, and we saw other sages said it as well, Mordecai and Esther were married. How did she end up becoming the queen? Because in that hunt for the next beautiful woman who's going to become the next queen of the biggest empire the world had ever known, King Ahasuerus just sent his soldiers out and gathered the most beautiful women against their will. Put them in the house of the women, had them treated with cosmetics and oils and whatever, groomed them for 6 months or something, and then slept with them all one at a time, and then put them in his private harem. I mean, this was like the most Me Too type of abuse, right? Me Too movement, the most terrible kind of exploitation and abuse. And it was rape. And so the point is, even after he selected her to be his queen, the way that she took that is every time I have to be with him, right? I'm already married to Mordecai under the laws of Moses and Israel. This is against my will that I've been taken into the king's house and raped by him anytime he wants me. And the king was probably having all kinds of other women as well. So the queen was just one of the women that he was taking by compulsion. What she's saying is that now that she's going to go petition on behalf of the Jewish people, she's going to go to him, right, as his queen and, be willing to obviously be nice to him, as it were, seduce him so that he's going to be very well disposed to her when she makes her request, don't kill my people, right? So once she goes to him where she's not being forced to, but it's her own choice, well, at that moment, she's going to actually become his wife, the king's wife, and she's no longer going to be permitted to Mordecai. So Mordecai and Esther really are making this extreme sacrifice of their own marriage for the sake of saving the lives of the Jewish people. And that's what's really going on in this moment, according to Rabbi Abba's reading. Now, there is a dispute with regard to the meaning of the verse Esther 4:17. So Mordecai passed via Avur. Rava said this means that he passed the first day of Passover as a fast day, understanding the word via Avur in the sense of sin, avera, as by doing so he transgressed the obligation to rejoice on the festival. And Shmuel said it means that he crossed over, avar, a stream, in order to bring the message to all. We all need to fast along with Esther and pray to the Holy One that we all have our lives spared. And we'll do the best that we can here in the palace with the palace intrigues and petitioning the king. But really, if we're going to be saved from Haman's evil decree to have all the Jews killed in one day, that salvation is going to come from the Lord. All salvations come from the Lord. That doesn't mean that we don't do our part. That's called doing your hishtadlus, right? We do our part. We do as much as we possibly can. But in the end, all salvations come from the Lord. All livelihoods come from the Lord. But we do our part. And the verse states, Esther 5:1, and it came to pass on the third day that Esther clothed herself in royalty, the third day of her fast. And the Gemara asks, it should have said, Esther clothed herself in royal garments. We saw this a couple days ago. And Rabbi Elazar said that Rabbi Hanina said this teaches that she clothed herself with Ruach HaKodesh, with the divine spirit. That's why Esther is a prophet. She's a prophetess. She was clothed with divine spirit of inspiration. And as it is written here, 1 Chronicles 12:19, and she clothed herself. And it is written elsewhere, and the Spirit clothed Amasai. So just as there the reference is to the spirit of divine inspiration, so too here the term royalty is referring to the spirit of divine inspiration with which she clothed herself. She knew that she was proceeding along a course of events that was necessary to save her people. And that wasn't just a guess. She had prophecy from God. Apropos a statement that Rabbi Elazar said, that Rabbi Hanina said, the Gemara records other such statements. And Rabbi Elazar further said that Rabbi Hanina said, one should never regard, so we're going on a little digression here, but some beautiful teachings. One should never regard the blessing of an ordinary person, hediot, as light in your eyes, meaning insubstantial. It doesn't matter. Like you're so anxious to get a blessing from a big tzaddik, from a big saint, from a big rabbi, from a powerful, wealthy person, but just any blessing, but a blessing from any person is an important matter, and you should relish if you get blessed by any human being, right? One should never regard the blessing of an ordinary person as insubstantial in your eyes, as two of the great men of their generations received blessings from ordinary people, and those blessings were fulfilled in them. And who were these people? David and Daniel, King David and the prophet Daniel. David, for Araunah blessed him, as it is written, and Araunah said to the king, may the Lord your God accept you. 2 Samuel 24:23. And this was fulfilled. That blessing was fulfilled. And Daniel, for Darius blessed him, as it is written, your God, whom you serve continually, he will rescue you. He will rescue you. And this was fulfilled when Daniel was saved from the lion's den. You know, is Darius an ordinary person? I mean, he is a king of a mighty empire. But okay, in a Torah world, he's just an ordinary person. And Rabbi Elazar further said that Rabbi Hanina said, one should not regard the curse of an ordinary person as insubstantial in your eyes. Just as we take the blessing of any person seriously, we take the curse that any person gives quite seriously also. For Avimelech cursed Sarah, saying, behold, it is to you a covering of the eyes, to all that are with you. Genesis 20:16. And indeed, this curse was fulfilled in her descendant, as it is stated, and it came to pass that when Isaac was old, his eyes were dim, so that he could not see. And Abimelech's curse of covered eyes was fulfilled through Sarah's son, Yitzhak, in his blindness. And Rabbi Elazar further said that Rabbi Hanina said, come and see the attribute of the Holy One, blessed be he, is unlike the attribute of a man of flesh and blood. This is a structure that the way that God does things is unlike the way people do things. And here is how. And we see that structure quite a few times throughout the Talmud. So here, what is the example that is given? For it is the attribute of flesh and blood that a man places the pot on the fire and then he puts water in the pot to heat up the water. So first that a man places the pot on the fire and then he puts in the water. However, the Holy One, blessed be he, first puts in the water and then he places the pot on the fire to fulfill that which is stated at the sound of his giving a multitude of waters in the heavens, Jeremiah 10:13, which he explains as follows. First, God set the multitudes of water in place, and afterwards he created the heavens to hold the water. Right, so when we talk about in the creation story of Genesis, the primordial waters, and then we said that there was a rakia, a firmament, right, that would separate the upper waters from the lower waters. So first there was this kind of spiritual water, probably not the same kind of water as in our oceans, right? But it was something called water, and there was no container for it. It was just like this water, without a vessel. And then God made the vessel to delineate where the water goes after he made the water. This is an attribute of the Holy One, not of people. And Rabbi Elazar further said that Rabbi Hanina said, whoever reports a saying in the name of he who said it brings redemption to the world. When you've heard something wise, make sure to attribute where you heard it. as it is stated with respect to the incident of Bigsan and Teresh. And Esther reported it to the king in the name of Mordecai. Right? He told her, there's two guys plotting to kill you, Ahasuerus. And then she reported that to the king in the name of Mordecai. And this eventually brought redemption, as Mordecai was later rewarded for saving the king's life, which paves the way for the miraculous salvation in the events of the book of Esther. And Rabbi Lazar further said that Rabbi Hanina said, when a righteous man passes from this earth and is lost, he is lost only for the rest of his generation, who is now deprived of him, but not for the righteous individual himself. Right? When a righteous person leaves this world, we are sad because he left us. It's amazing that this was yesterday's page, and we were at that Shloshim for Moti, who was definitely a righteous person, and we miss him terribly. But he's not lost. He's just lost to us. And this is similar to a man who has lost a pearl. The pearl does not care if it is lost, as wherever it is found, it is still a pearl. It is only lost to its owner, right? The righteous person leaves this world. He's sort of abounding in light in the world of souls, and he'll come back here when Mashiach comes. But now, in our generation, that person is lost to us, and we miss him terribly. Haman said, yet all this avails me nothing. We're back to interpreting verses from the Megillah. So at Esther 5:13, Haman says, yet all this avails me nothing. And Rabbi Lazar said, right, Haman is like he's getting so much honor from the king, but it doesn't mean anything to him because this guy, Mordecai, the Jew, won't bow down to him, right? That's what bothers Haman. And Rabbi Lazar said that Rabbi Hanina said, when Haman saw Mordecai sitting at the king's gate, he said, yet all this avails me nothing. This may be understood as was suggested by Rav Chisda. For Rav Chisda said, this one, Mordecai, came as one with the heritage of a rich man, whereas that one, Haman, came as one with the heritage of a poor man, as Mordecai had been Haman's slave master and was aware of Haman's lowly lineage. And Rav Papa said, and he was called the slave, excuse me, and Rav Papa said, and he was called the slave who was sold for a loaf of bread. And Haman's previously quoted statement, yet all this avails me nothing, teaches that all the treasures of that wicked one were engraved on his heart. And when he saw Mordecai sitting at the king's gate, he said, as long as Mordecai is around, all this that I wear on my heart, all my riches, all my wealth, and the way that I dress to proclaim my wealth, all of it does nothing for me because this man doesn't respect me. And in the winter, when the heating is on and the air is very dry, it often bothers my sinuses. Okay. Excuse me. All right, where am I? And Rabbi Elazar further said that Rabbi Hanina said, so more sayings, right, with this lineage, Rabbi Elazar in the name of Rabbi Hanina, that in the future, the Holy One, blessed be He, will be a crown on the head of each and every righteous man. Obviously, that's metaphoric. How could God be a crown for a person? But what does he mean? As it is stated, Isaiah 28:5, in that day shall the Lord of hosts be for a crown of glory and for a diadem of beauty to the residue, the remnant of his people. And what is the meaning of for a crown of glory, tzvi, and for a diadem, velitzefirat, of beauty, a crown, vitzeferet, right? A crown for those who do his will, tzivyono, and a diadem for those that await his glory. Now, one might have thought that this extends to all such individuals, and therefore the verse states, to the residue of his people, meaning to whoever regards himself as a remainder, small and unimportant, like residue. In other words, anyone who is humble, and carries himself humbly and looks to God for everything and looks to God for salvation and tries to do God's will in all things, then at the end of days, that person will glow, right? Will glow with righteousness and like that love and fear of God that he had during his life. It will make him glow at the time of the, in the Messianic age. And it'll be that love and fear that he had in his life will be like a crown for him at that time. But anybody who is arrogant in this world will lack such a crown, even if they merit to return. Apropos the quotation from Isaiah, the Gemara explains the following verse, which states, Isaiah 28:6, "And for a spirit of justice to him that sits in judgment, and for strength to them that turn back the battle to the gate." What does this verse mean? And for a spirit of justice, this is referring to one who brings his evil inclination to trial and forces himself to repent. To him that sits in judgment, this is referring to one who judges an absolutely true judgment. And for strength, this is referring to one who triumphs over his evil inclination. Who is strong? One who conquers his own inclination. That's that's Pirkei Avos 4:1. Them that turn back the battle, this is referring to those that give and take in their discussion of halacha, Jewish law, in the battle of understanding the Torah. And to the gate, this is referring to the Torah scholars who arrive early and stay late at the darkened gates of the synagogues and study halls. In other words, on the one hand, society wants to celebrate great warriors, right? Who went to war and fought with swords and spears and guns or whatever and triumphed and were military heroes. But there's another war that is always ongoing, and that is the war to do the right thing in this world. And you have to, gear up and armor up and put on your battle face and enter that battle every day, because our own evil inclinations are always trying to defeat us and undermine our good inclination and lead us astray to do bad. And it's a battle that we have to fight constantly. And one who conquers his evil impulse is a mighty warrior and will be rewarded for that fight. Now, the Gemara continues with an episode associated with a verse from Isaiah. The attribute of justice, right? God's attribute of justice, said before the Holy One, blessed be he, Master of the universe. How are these, referring to the Jewish people, different from those, the other nations of the world, such that God performs miracles only on behalf of the Jewish people? And the Holy One, blessed be he, said to the attribute of justice, to his own attribute of justice, right? When it's like Gevura, God's attribute of justice, is saying to God, why do you favor the Jewish people? Why do you perform miracles for them? Aren't all the people of the world worthy to have miracles when they need to be saved? And the Holy One, blessed be he, said to his attribute of justice, the Jewish people occupied themselves with Torah, whereas the other nations of the world did not occupy themselves with Torah. And the attribute of justice said to him, well, about these Jews, quoting Isaiah 28:7, these also reel through wine and stagger through strong drink. The priest and the prophet reel through strong drink. They are confused because of wine. They stagger because of strong drink. They reel in vision. They stumble in judgment. They stumble, paku, in judgment, pilaliya. And the word paku in this context is referring only to Gehenna, the fires of Gehenna. As it is stated, 1 Samuel 25:31, that this shall not be a cause of stumbling, puka, to you. And the word peliliya here is referring only to judges, as it is stated, and he shall pay as the judges determine, befelilim. Exodus 21:22. So the response of the attribute of justice to God, who says, well, the Jews concern themselves with Torah, The attribute of justice is basically saying to God, well, the Jewish people have also sinned and neglected their Torah study, and consequently, they are liable to receive punishment. And we have, and a lot, and persecution, and heavy, heavy, heavy hand of punishment in all these generations, right? So we had miracles performed for us a few times, but the curses have been much heavier and longer lasting, it would seem. Unless you say, well, no, but the miracle of life and the miracle of that the Torah was given to us at Mount Sinai, that's an ongoing miracle, and that revelation is always happening, outweighing all the heaviness of those curses and persecution. New subject, the Gemara. And I'm coming to the end, so I'm gonna have to actually stop a little early because this is such a rich page and we've been in it for quite a while. Okay, so the Gemara returns to its explanation of the verses of the Megillah. And the verse states with regard to Esther, and she stood in the inner court of the king's house, Esther 5:1. And Rabbi Levi said, once she reached the chamber of the idols, which was the inner court, the divine presence left her. And she immediately said, my God, why have you forsaken me? Psalm 22. Perhaps it is because you judge an unintentional sin as one performed intentionally, and an action done due to circumstances beyond one's control as one that is done willingly. Or perhaps you, the divine presence, have left me because in my prayers I call Haman a dog. As it is stated, deliver my soul from the sword, my only one from the hand of the dog. Also Psalm 22. And she at once retracted and called him in her prayers a lion. As it is stated in the following verse, save me from the lion's mouth. Don't underestimate your enemies, right? The Haman was a mortal, powerful enemy. And the verse states at Esther 5:2, and so it was that when the king saw Esther the queen standing in the court, that she obtained favor in his sight. And the king held out to Esther the golden scepter that was in his hand. And Rabbi Yochanan said, 3 ministering angels happened to join her at that time. One that raised up her neck so that she could stand erect, free of shame. One that strung a cord of divine grace around her, that air of prophecy, endowing her with charm and beauty. And one that stretched the king's scepter to her. And how much was it stretched? That the king's scepter wasn't just like he pointed at her, like it actually grew. The scepter grew. And the scepter was 2 cubits, and he made it 12 cubits. The angel made it 12 cubits long. And some say that he made it 16 cubits, and yet others say he made it 24 cubits. And it was taught in Baraisa that he made it 60 cubits. And similarly, you find with the arm of Pharaoh's daughter, which she stretched out to take Moshe from the Nile. And so too you find with the teeth of the wicked, as it is written, you have broken the teeth of the wicked, Psalm 3:8. And with regard to which Reish Lakish, the sage, said, do not read it as you have broken, Shebarta, but as you have enlarged, Sheribavta. And Rabbi Bar Opharon said, in the name of Rabbi Elazar, who heard it from his teacher, who in turn heard it from his teacher, the scepter was stretched 200 cubits. And the verse states, then the king said to her, Esther 5:3, to Esther the queen, what is your wish? Even to half the kingdom, it shall be performed. And the Gemara comments that Ahasuerus intended only a limited offer, only half the kingdom, but not the whole kingdom, and not something that would serve as a barrier to the kingdom, as there is one thing to which the kingdom will never agree. And what is that? The building of the temple. If you ask me to have the temple rebuilt, that I'm not going to do. Anything else, up to half the kingdom, we can talk. And the verse states that Esther requested, if it seemed good unto the king, let the king and Haman come this day to the banquet that I have prepared for him. Such a seemingly modest request. And the sages taught in a Baraisa, what did Esther see to invite Haman to the banquet? Why didn't she just have a banquet with the king to ask him to save her people? Why did she invite Haman? And Rabbi Elazar says, she hid a snare, a trap for him. As it is stated, let their table become a snare before them. As she assumed that she would be able to trip up Haman during the banquet. She knew what was coming and that she was going to be able to turn the tables on Haman in front of the king so that the king would see for himself what a louse Haman really was. And Rabbi Yehoshua says she learned to do this from the Jewish teachings of her father's house. As it is stated, If your enemy be hungry, give him bread to eat. Proverb 25:21. And Rabbi Meir says she invited him in order that he be near her at all times, so that he would not take counsel and rebel against Ahasuerus when he discovered that the king was angry with him. She realized that Haman was very powerful, had perhaps even had ascendancy over the king. So if she changed the king's mind and got him to agree to do what she wanted, and Haman heard about that from a distance, perhaps he would usurp the throne, take over the whole establishment, have Ahasuerus killed, take over the kingdom, and her, and the fact that she convinced Ahasuerus to save the Jews wouldn't help her or the Jews at all. So she wanted to keep, her friends close and her enemy closer. Rabbi Yehuda says she invited Haman so that it not be found out that she was a Jew, as had she distanced him, he would have become suspicious. And Rabbi Nehemiah says she did this so that the Jewish people would not say, we have a sister in the king's house. Why is she taking actions that would prevent the Jewish people from knowing they have a sister in the king's house? Because then they wouldn't fast and pray for salvation. They would just leave it to her. They needed everybody united against the danger. Rabbi Yosei says she acted in this manner so that Haman would always be on hand for her, as that would enable her to find an opportunity to cause him to stumble in front of the king. And Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh said that Esther said to herself, perhaps the omnipresent will take notice that all are supporting Haman and nobody is supporting the Jewish people, and he will perform for us a miracle. All different possible motivations why she invited Haman to the little banquet. And Rabbi Yehoshua ben Korcha said, she said to herself, I will act kindly toward him and thereby bring the king to suspect that we are having an affair. And she did so in order that both he and she would be killed. Essentially, Esther was willing to be killed as long as Haman was also killed, in order that the decree would be annulled. And Rabban Gamliel says Ahasuerus was a fickle king. We know that. He changed his mind a bunch of times. And Esther hoped that if he saw Haman on multiple occasions, eventually he would change his opinion of him. Rabban Gamliel said, we still need the words of Rabbi Eliezer Hamodai to understand why Esther invited Haman to her banquet. As it is taught in a Baraisa, Rabbi Eliezer Hamodai says she made the king jealous of him, and she made the other ministers jealous of him, and in this way she brought about his downfall. By elevating him to be the most important guy, the only other person invited to the queen's feast besides the king himself, it incurred the jealousy of others, including the king. And once you've got the jealousy of a bunch of people pointed your way, the evil eye pointed your way, in other words, your downfall is imminent. And Rabbah says, Esther invited Haman to her banquet in order to fulfill that which is stated, pride goes before destruction. Proverbs 16:18, which indicates that in order to destroy the wicked, one must first bring them to pride. It can be understood according to Abaye and Rava, who both say that she invited Haman in order to fulfill the verse, when they are heated, I will make feasts for them, and I will make them drunk, that they may rejoice and sleep a perpetual sleep. Jeremiah 51:39. Set them up for the fall, bring them up high so that they fall and die. And the Gemara relates that Rabbah bar Avu once happened upon Elijah the prophet and said to him, in accordance with whose understanding did Esther see fit to act in this manner? What was the true reason behind her invitation to have Haman at her feast? And he, Elijah, said to him, Esther was motivated by all these reasons mentioned here and did so for all the reasons previously stated by the Tanaim, the sages of the Mishna, and all the reasons stated by the Amoraim, the sages of the Gemara. And the verse states, I'm going to stop there. We're already at 1 hour, and I'll just take a couple of questions. Okay. Megillah 15 questions. Bill Eldridge, pro tip to the ancient people of Jericho: don't oppress and denigrate the people who literally live in your principal defensive system, meaning the wall around Jericho. It's never a good idea. Just so. Sharon, it seems that our greatest leaders were from what appears to be from questionable origins. David and Mashiach, from Tamar, and from Ruth. Exactly. And Bill, as mentioned before, the queen would have had a political power base of her own if Daniel had transferred with the conquest of Babylon by Persia into the new government, given that Queen Vashti was almost surely married to secure the legitimacy of that conquest. Being the queen's chamberlain could absolutely have been a demotion in one sense, no longer senior minister to the king, and a promotion in another. Spokesperson for a separate and autonomous power within the court, offered peerage and security because of it. As we saw, right, when that empire was formed, right, it was Persia and Media, and to keep that coalition in power, they had to sort of give senior offices, right? So the king, from one background, the queen from another, Danielle, comes from another background, but is kept as a minister, maybe assigned to the queen, but not really a demotion. And Sharon says, but Achashverosh collected virgins. Was Esther both Mordecai's wife and a virgin? Perhaps because she was betrothed, but they had not consumed. Or perhaps, they were supposed to take virgins, but they just took a young and very beautiful woman and didn't examine that carefully. But it's a great question. All right, my friends, that's what I've got today. With God's help, we'll gather again tomorrow for page 16 here in Tractate Megillah at 6 p.m., the regular time. Have a great night.